All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out. My name is Mark Pavlidis, as Robin mentioned. I'm co-founder, CTO, and for the last 11 months, managing director at Flixel for the time being. So today, I'm going to talk about App Store subscriptions. Who has used App Store subscriptions, implemented App Store subscriptions? Quick show of hands, just so we're kind of a little bit of everything. And you've subscribed to apps. Yeah. How many people have subscribed to apps? And done so in the last, say, 6 months? And how have you seen the experience change? We'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, and specifically auto-renewing subscriptions. Who's implemented those? Server side? Okay, this will be boring for you guys, but hopefully we'll give everybody a bit of a foundation, and I'll give you some updates in terms of, or some useful nuggets in order to hopefully save you from some grief. So, quickly today, why should you choose a subscription business model? Who am I to know about this stuff? What do you need to get started? So we'll go through all the kind of fundamentals. And most importantly, how to avoid some of the pain points that you'll get or you will run into implementing subscriptions. And finally, where are we having beer? So let's get right into it. Why should you choose subscriptions? It's the fastest growing business model on the App Store. Over 80% of all apps are free, and that's up from 2014, and it's only continuing to increase. Subscription apps generate over $10 billion on the store already, and it's projected to increase 7-fold by the next 5 years. So in 2012, paid apps hit an intersection point with free apps with in-app purchase in terms of sales on the store, and paid apps continue to decline at a dramatic rate, and they're only now 10% of revenue on the App Store. So if you're looking to release a new app onto the store and you're going the paid app route, you probably really need to have a good reason for that, because most of the revenue is being generated in different ways. So something to consider. Thanks. So your revenue graph, when you have a paid app, generally looks like something like this. Really low, and every once in a while you get these big impulses, right? You release a new app on the App Store. You win an Apple Design Award. And then it falls down to a really low amount, right? So that's a really hard way to run a business. If you choose subscriptions, you're going to start off with, now I can use the laser. You can start off with a really low amount to start off, but over time, that subscription revenue is going to recur and grow over time. So looking at the long scale here, you can see as a paid app, you have a few spikes and not very much revenue, but then over time, oops. Over time, that starts to grow slowly. And it might not look like much compared to that big spike, but 3 to 4 months of revenue over here equals one of those spikes. So are you releasing apps? Are you getting featured? Are you winning awards every 3 to 4 months that would justify getting a spike like that? Probably not. But with recurring revenue as a subscription model, you can easily be doing that kind of revenue. So that's a pretty compelling reason. So recurring revenue is the big one as to why you would want to use a subscription model. It also allows you to have higher price points and fewer customers. So one of the things that we had with paid apps was this race to the bottom. Because you have this app, you have some pictures on the App Store and a description, and what does it do? I don't know, you don't know, we haven't used it. So you have to try it out. How do you try it out? Well, you have to pay for it. So your willingness to pay a high price point for this app is very low unless it's a familiar brand, unless you already know about it from somebody else. So that was one of the many reasons we had a race to the bottom on the App Store. Whereas if you could freely give this app to your customers, let them try it out, and then when they see the true value of that, Some of them might say, no, $10, $20, $100, $300 a year. We're selling apps at those prices because people say this is valuable to me, and I can realize that value by being able to try it out. That also means you can build meaningful relationships with those customers, because it isn't just trying to get as many as you can because they pay you once and they're gone. They're never going to pay you again. So why do you want to do anything to support them? You're just trying to chase that next dollar, that next new sale. Whereas instead of focusing on that breadth, you can focus on a narrow number of customers and deliver really good value to them. And they become really good customers, and that helps your product get much better. Another really important thing with subscriptions is that you don't have to hold back big features, right? The traditional model of having major releases every year or two or whatnot is that you can have this really great idea that would be really powerful for your customers, but now you're going to hold it back till the next big version so you can charge them an upgrade price, or you can have them buy it again. Well, that's a horrible customer experience, because wouldn't it be better that you spend all your time right now working on the feature that delivers the most value for your customer to all of your customers instead of holding that back? With a subscription model, you can do that because you're motivated to do that because you're going to acquire new customers by shipping that feature today. You're going to retain more customers from churning out because you're shipping that new feature that's valuable to them today. So it really makes sense. Apple said so. Meeting with our WWDR rep in 2014, Adobe had just gone the subscription route. We're discussing with him, how do we plan for doing upgrade pricing, all the rest of it. Are those things coming on the App Store? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Nope. His suggestion before any of this was available was, think about doing subscriptions. So Apple was already thinking about this 5 years ago. And everybody's doing it, if that matters to you. Okay, so the question is, are subscriptions right for you? Are you creating an application that's providing ongoing value? Okay. If your answer is yes, proceed. Is the model right for your potential customers? So some customers, it just might not be right. And if it's a no, well, then you make it a paid app, or you make it paid with in-app purchase one time, and that's it. Do you have ongoing infrastructure costs? If this is a yes, you really need to use subscriptions because your marginal revenue continues, or your marginal profits will continue to go down and down and down as someone pays you once and then keeps using it indefinitely as years go on. So popular categories for subscriptions: content, obviously, music, movies, those types of things. Utilities, there's a lot of utility apps that are subscriptions. Dating apps, productivity apps, and creative apps. And Adobe set the bar there for creative apps. But there really is no limit to what you could do that. And in 2016, Apple removed the limitations that they had on subscriptions, that you can add subscriptions to any app, to unlock any app. All right, so what do I know about in-app subscription purchases? Actually, my first in-app subscription experience was for the founders of League at Short Covers before it launched, buying books in it, which was then rejected by Apple, and we could never ship it, and we had to kick out, but that's a whole other story. First implemented non-renewing subscriptions in 2011. So this is when subscriptions and in-app purchases had just been released, in-app purchases in 2011, and you could do subscriptions, but they were non-renewing. I was working on this app called Gardly, and you could subscribe monthly or yearly, and this is kind of what it looked like. I just want to draw your attention to the fact that it was just text about it, just a price, that kind of thing. And this is what the pop-up said. This is how far Apple was on actually understanding subscriptions, because the dialogue was very much for in-app purchase consumables, because do you want to buy one X for some period of time? It's like subscribing to it. That doesn't really make any sense. Okay, so starting there, with Flixel, we added subscription plans at the end of 2014 for our hosting services. So it was just for the hosting services. You could subscribe to an app, yearly, monthly, and doing all of that. In 2015, before it was legal to unlock apps exclusively with subscriptions, we bundled the app unlock into those hosting plans because we had a hosting service, and was able to turn that into the model that you see with Adobe, by being able to say it unlocks the app. So we started that in 2015. And throughout that time, worked around a number of limitations because, again, the App Store was not designed for auto-renewing subscriptions, and Apple was doing the long, painful work underneath the hood of what is a very iTunes Connect. To work around some of the limitations. So for example, changing your prices. You want to change your price? You can't really change your price if you want to change your price, you have to change it for all your customers. But if you wanted to change your price for new customers and keep the old customers at the same price, your only option was to create a new SKU and have new people buy it at that price. And then if you go to the App Store and you drop down on in-app purchases and you see this large number of in-app purchases, all with the same name, all at different price points, no idea what's going on there. It's one of the reasons why you see that. But lucky for you, there's still a lot of limitations and workarounds to work through. So let's go through the basics. I'm gonna kind of cover what it is what you need to do to implement in-app purchases and auto-renewing subscriptions in your apps. And then we'll talk about some of the problems that you have and how to avoid some. So simply, you start off by creating your auto-renewing subscriptions in iTunes Connect. You initiate StoreKit at launch and fetch your products. It's very important that you initiate StoreKit at launch. You might hear me say that again. You will show your localized plans in the app, along with a conspicuous disclaimer. Remember those two words. And always, always end your transactions. You should also provide a mechanism for people to be able to restore their subscriptions and their consumable in-app purchases, as you always have. Sorry if this is a little bit hard to see, but this is just the UI on App Store Connect. You've got 4 types of in-app purchases that you can create: consumable, non-consumable, auto-renewing subscription, and non-renewing subscription. I'm going to focus on subscriptions. The auto-renewing subscription is one that auto-renews. Every time the period, either whatever you select that to be, from 1 week to 1 month to 2 months to 3 months to 6 months to 1 year, it will auto-renew at that period. The non-renewing subscriptions is exactly that. It's designed more for static content. The example Apple gives is that you give people access to a catalog of content that they can access for 1 year, and it doesn't auto-renew. They would have to go in and renew it manually. So for the rest of this talk, we're going to focus on the auto-renewing subscriptions. You create a name, you give it a product ID, you're going to use that product ID within your app to reference it. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to create a subscription group. Subscription groups are really important, and it overcomes one of the limitations that you had that I was speaking to before, which is having multiple subscription plans. It's on you to make sure that customers do not subscribe to multiple subscriptions if there is not multiple levels of service that are orthogonal. So if you have tiers of bronze, silver, and gold in terms of opening up your access, they should all be in the same subscription group. Right? So what makes up a subscription group is different levels. You can organize them into different levels and different durations. And this helps you manage not having multiple concurrent subscriptions at the same time. You rank the subscriptions in descending order by what provides the most access. And that ranking defines the rules for upgrades, cross-grades, and downgrades. So as an example, you have a plan, say the silver plan, and you want to upgrade to your gold plan. When you upgrade to a gold plan, that automatically transacts, and the customer is charged the difference in terms of what they had previously paid, the prorated amount to go up. If a customer is going down a plan, they will not be changed to that plan until the end of their current subscription, at which point they'll downgrade. So this way, Apple doesn't issue refunds if you're downgrading, and also prevents people from trying to game the system by upgrading for a day, doing what they need to do, and then downgrading. This is kind of what that looks. So we've got the Blendio Business Yearly and Monthly grouped together, the Professional group together, the Mobile group together, and the iOS group together. And that defines that ranking order and level of access for all of those. So we said, what are the steps? First step, initiate store kit. So in application did finish launching, you set things up, and what you're going to do in, so instead of just putting this line of code into your app delegate, create a controller that is responsible for doing all of this. You can encapsulate all of that in there, and this lives on. So you'll add this instance to the SK payment queue observer. You'll add it as an observer. So now any of those SK payment queue delegate methods will be handled by that. So the most important one is the payment queue updated transactions. And there's a set of states that that transaction can be in. And you handle what happens there through that. Next and most important thing that you should do when you launch your app, or whenever your app becomes active, or some frequent rate to make sure that you always have the latest valid products, is to refresh those products. And that's simply by creating a SK product request, and you give it a list of product identifiers. So this list of product identifiers can either be baked into the app, or you can dynamically send that down to the app if you want to change the list of subscription objects that are available, products that are available, and you'll request those. And the store kit will give you back a set of SK product objects that contain some relevant information for and what you'll use in order to create the purchases. Okay, so here's some of the properties that are available for that. So they give you a nice localized description, localized title, and a price and a locale. But you want to localize that price. So here's just a quick little extension on SK product to be able to give you a formatted price. Because your app is going to be available in up to 155 stores with all kinds of different currencies and price points and all of those things. You don't want to hard code any of this. You want to make sure that you take the values that are provided by the store. Similarly, those localized description and localized titles are set in App Store Connect on the subscription objects themselves. And then you'll display them something like this. So you can see we've got the different plans. They're offered at different rates. You tap them, you can buy them, and you have a conspicuous disclaimer. For those of you that couldn't see the little one, here's a little bit bigger. I was going to read this, but this is just going on too long. You've probably seen this before. Just put this copy in your app exactly like this is, and put it on the App Store marketing description. Make sure you have links that go out to your website. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Start a purchase, create a payment from your product, add it to the queue, away it goes. The purchase completes, your delegate method gets called, and you handle it. Once that transaction state hits purchased, you can then unlock your application to do what it needs to do. So you can either look at the transaction and unlock that and store that somehow and try to maintain some state on that. But what happens when a renewal occurs? You're going to get hit with that delegate method again. You've got to maintain that, deal with that. What happens if the user deletes the app? They need to have that restore functionality in there. And what happens if you have more than one app that you want to be able to unlock, as the example I showed you for Flixel, or have web services? This transactional model doesn't really work. So Apple added being able to access the receipt, and all of that information, all of that transactional data is available in the receipt for you to use. So you can use that in order to unlock your app. So what do you do there? Once you've verified on device or sent your server, sent that receipt to your server, you can then call finish transactions. Always call finish transactions. If you don't, StoreKit's going to keep posting that transaction to you. So you're either just wasting cycles or maybe providing a bad user experience, depending on how you handle that. Also, Apple is more likely to refund the transaction if you don't. So if that customer calls and says, oh, this app, I have a problem with this app with the subscription, and they go in and see, well, you never finished the transaction, they're much more likely to issue them a refund. So that's also important. So how do you do on-device validation? This is like a 3-hour talk on its own, so I'm just going to quickly blitz through it. You grab the receipt, you grab the URL where the App Store receipt is stored in the bundle. You grab that NS data, and the receipt is formatted in a cryptographic container, which is just a signed bit of data in the ASN1 encoded format. So this is just simply a number of key value pairs that you can then pull out of this container in order to access the relevant fields that you're interested in. This is well documented, and the best practices talk from Dub last year gives you really good details from that. So if you need to do that, I refer you to that. Okay. One of the things that you need to do with this, you need to statically build some cryptographic framework like OpenSSL in order to be able to do this. You need to bundle in Apple's root certificate to verify the authenticity of that receipt. And there is no provided implementation from Apple because that becomes a single point of failure. So their take on it is security. You have to go and implement it on your own, and you all do a different implementations, or everybody just goes and rips off the same implementation on GitHub, whatever. But it's not them that's going to be the point of failure. So that's one way to do it. And that's kind of laborious, and it's limiting. So what they're pushing for is to have server-side receipt validation. So this is where the fun begins. So if you can, use your server for receipt validation. You're going to send that base64 binary data to your server, and you're going to store it there. And now you can do a bunch of things with that. One is that you can send that to an endpoint that Apple has, and it will respond with JSON data of what is contained in the receipt. So instead of having to do all of this cryptographic parsing and doing all of this extra work and compiling OpenSSL, you send it to your server, you send the request comes back, boom, you have a nice little JSON file that contains all of this information. The JSON also includes other relevant information that you wouldn't get within the on-device support. So there's another reason to do that. So what does on-device validation look like? You definitely have to do this if you have multiple apps, platforms, etc., because the server is now the holder of truth, not your individual app, because that doesn't scale. You can't have one app be able to do that, because if you never launch that app, then how does that all work? Everybody's familiar with ATS. All of those requirements apply to the server-to-server communications with this. So you're going to have different endpoints for your sandbox and production environment. Sandbox and production on the App Store. Whew. So this is one of those points where you're going to have a different endpoint. So when you send a request, say you have an App Store, or you have a production receipt, you send it to the sandbox, it'll give you a status code that says, hey, go use the other one. So you can write some server code that quickly will try one and try the other and deal with that, no problem. You should never, ever, ever call these methods from device. Anybody know why? Sorry, I've been talking a lot. I'm going to try to call a response. Why shouldn't you call the verification methods with your data from the device itself? Anybody? Boom, you got it. So you can get man in the middle, so then whoever can just return whatever valid JSON they want back, because they have all control over that. Interesting tidbit, I had a problem with Blendio when we launched it, and I tried to man in the middle just to see what was going on. If you make a store kit request, now I don't know when this changed, but if you make a store kit request and you're man in the middling yourself, then it will kill the app. So Apple's kind of helped to alleviate some of these problems just by jettisoning the app. Finally, the status code indicates which environment you should use, which I already mentioned. Additional fields that are only available through the server. Things that are really important. Auto renew status indicates whether the customer has clicked the cancel button and they're going to cancel. This gives you an opportunity to be able to remarket to them or do something to win them back before they leave. If they are renewing, they might upgrade or downgrade or cross-grade. It tells you what product they're going to change to at the end of the current duration. If you change prices, there's a consent status to say that this customer has agreed to changing to the price increase. If they hit the end of their subscription period, but there's a billing problem, Apple leaves 60 days in order to allow that customer to update that and continue on with their subscription. So this indicates whether they're in that dunning period. And finally, after their subscription is churned, it tells you why. Was it voluntary? Did they click cancel? Is it a billing problem? Was it a price increase or something else? So some really useful information here. So this is why you want to be using the server-side version of that. So let me quickly go through a little demo of what that looks like. If it's too small, I'll just quickly skip out. Let me know. Is that too small for people? Can you guys all see this over here? I can't make that bigger. So this is a receipt that's just a license, and it contains this receipt, the status and the environment, and the receipt just contains, says, hey, this person bought version 1.0.1, and that's great. So let's look at a churn customer. Oh, of course, now I'm not connected to the internet. There we go. So the churn customer has this extra data, not just what you saw in the receipt, but it has this latest receipt info. So for in-app purchases, that's where you want to go to be able to see those auto-renewing in-app purchase subscriptions. And you're going to see that they subscribed one time. And in this, it shows you a purchase date, the original purchase date, the date it expires, whether it was a trial, whether it had an intro period, and finally the latest receipt. So when you get this latest receipt back, that's the receipt data that you now want to update on your server for that subscription, because that has the latest information, and you use that to make the request the next time you want to refresh and verify the receipt. And finally, you have this pending renewal information. As I mentioned, there's extra data that you only get from the server, and that shows us here that the expiration intent is that they canceled, and the auto renew status is false. So here is a customer who has canceled. So very quickly looking down, we can see they started as a trial. They then renewed because they have 2 transactions in the receipt info. The second one expired or will expire next week. And we know that they're not going to auto renew because auto renew status is false. And finally, one last example is a customer who is continuing to be, or is still an active customer. We can see that they purchased this in February. It'll expire next February, and their auto renew status is 1. So the fields that exist in that pending information change depending on their current state, and then it'll also have whether they're in the dunning period and whatnot. So, okay, so, and that's the bit for the live demo. Sorry, there's a lot of content here, and I want to make sure that I shared a lot of it with you. So managing server to server. There is a URL that you can add that Apple will push to you when there are changes. So it's in your general app information on App Store Connect, and you update the status URL there. And that's an endpoint that it will hit. So unfortunately here, they only have one endpoint input. So you have to check the environment property on that and check to see whether it's the production one or the sandbox one, and then punt that request over to your dev server if you want to handle this properly. No idea why they didn't just put 2 in there. Anyhow. For each one of these requests, there's different information formatted slightly differently for each type. So you're going to get, there's a new subscription, there's a subscription change, there's a cancellation, there's a renewal. Those types of events are what they're sending you. So one of the things that you want to do here is just, instead of having to parse each one of those and implement all of these different fields and all these different behaviors for each one of these things, my recommendation is just reach into the request that comes. Each one of those has the original transaction ID, right? That's your primary key for all of the transactions that happen for one subscription. Just grab that and do your normal refresh on that subscription that you would otherwise, because you're going to get more information than just the delta of what this is going to be providing to you. Also you want to do this, delivery is not guaranteed. So Apple may hit this endpoint to tell you that a customer renewed or they upgraded or they did these things, but that's not going to happen. So what you should do is still every single day renew or refresh all of your subscriptions. So hit the verify endpoint every single day with every single subscription to get the latest data. You'll see whether they've clicked cancel, you'd see whether they renewed, you'll see all of those things. So how else can you use the App Store to increase conversions? This is for the business people in the room. So one way is to have promoted in-app purchases. So you may have seen the promoted in-app purchases on the store, in app sections. They even feature it on the on the main sections in the Today tab and in the Apps tab. You can have auto-renewing subscription offers. So there have been now for a little over a year intro offers, and just last month Apple added promotional offers for existing customers or churned customers. So you can offer additional offers to them. And finally, how you handle that past due experience when someone hasn't updated their credit card information or whatnot, and they haven't billed out, but they haven't clicked cancel, and they're in this state of past due. Okay, so quickly, promoted IAPs. Where are we for time? Am I dragging on? Okay. Promoted IAPs, you can have up to 20 in-app purchases. They'll all appear on your store. It's any one of your in-app purchases that you have. You can make one of those an in-app purchase. And it gives customers a one-tap way to download and purchase your app and purchase that subscription, or any in-app purchase, actually. You can do any in-app purchase. It isn't limited to subscriptions, but from the App Store. So browsing through the App Store, they see one of those things, oh, that's got a good deal on it. They tap it. If you don't have the app downloaded, it'll download the app, launch the app, and start the purchase process. So really, there's no excuse to not do promoted in-app purchases. You need to have unique images, and you also have to you need unique names. So include the duration. If you have a yearly and a monthly, make sure yearly and monthly is in those names. And also, it shows up in your search results. So the App Store optimization, people are really going to like this. And another reason, and this is also another reason why you initialize StoreKit right at launch, because someone taps that button, the app launches, that transaction's coming in, and you want to handle it because someone just tapped on a button that they want to buy something. You want to handle that right away. So the delegate method for handling this is payment queue should add store payment for product. So here it gives you the SK product already. You don't have to do that whole fetching of the ID. And this returns a bool. So the documentation says if you want this purchase to just start beginning, return true here, and the purchase will just start. Otherwise, there's stuff to do. You say you return false here, and you handle it. You hold on to that product, and you do your thing. Except the rules in the App Store around subscriptions has changed, as you may have seen and as they've posted. So what would have been a beautiful experience, you tap on a thing on the App Store, it downloads the app opens up, you get the purchase window, you click buy, boom, you're done in 5 seconds. Well, because of abuse of subscriptions on the App Store, Apple has had to clamp down on subscriptions. And one of the things they've made us do is everybody? What? Sorry? Oh, sorry. What do we have to show before you have to buy? The conspicuous disclaimer. Sorry, I didn't set it up right. Yes, so what you need to do now is don't do this don't return true here, even if you want to buy that, because they're gonna reject you, because they're gonna say, you didn't show the price, you didn't show the disclaimer, so you're gonna get rejected. So what do you do instead? You hold on to that payment, you present your store or just that product in some way along with the disclaimer, and you show the price in this conspicuous disclaimer. And if you have an app where you need the user to sign up or sign in and do those things, now you have an opportunity to do that. And once that sign up or sign in is complete, then you add that product to the that product payment to the payment queue, and away it goes. So it's not as smooth because of the changes to the App Store, but you can still have that really great experience where someone just taps, and within a few taps, they're able to have purchased your app without ever even using it. So do this. And this is kind of what it looks like in the app. You see there is subscription offers. In this case, this has a trial offer, and there's details there, so it highlights those trial offers, the introductory offers in the promoted in-app purchase as well. And then the search result looks like this, where the entire screen is your app, because the app comes back, and then your in-app purchase comes back. So as you're scrolling, you don't have a bunch of apps and you're not competing against a bunch of apps, your app shows up like that. And if you happen to have any Today stories, those generally pop up underneath. So you really have to scroll to get somebody else's app in there. So that's a really great way to do that. Oops. Subscription, so the introductory offers, there's 3 types: free trial, pay as you go, and pay up front. Free trial, you're probably familiar with. You have some period from 3 days to 6 months to a year, I believe, as a free trial before it bills into the regular amount. Pay as you go is you have a fixed amount for some period, some number of periods at a lower price point or at some price point, and then it renews at the regular price point. And pay up front gives you a way to do that during one period. It's unique by territory and plan. So therefore you can have a plan in a certain country and organize those offers in certain ways. This gives you opportunities to be able to have larger discounts in, say, developing nations than you would in first world nations in order to encourage people that are more price sensitive to be able to purchase. And as I said, it's added on the App Store, and you access that from your SK Products introductory price property. And this is how that can look. Promotional offers, you can do 10 promotional offers per plan. Again, this is something that was just added in the last couple of months. This is available to existing customers or churn customers, and you decide which offer is shown. So 10 come back in this set, and you can choose which one you want to display, you want to present to the customer. And the nice thing about this is it's not displayed in the App Store subscriptions. So this helps to clean up kind of that polluted in-app purchases list, because you can offer discounts without having to do new SKUs at different price points to be able to do that. So all of the growth hackers in the room or whoever you work with, you can point them to this and say that you have to implement this in order to get that kind of results. And this requires your server in the loop to determine the eligibility, as well as generating a signature for that. There's a whole process that's involved in that. Again, I'll defer this to another time, another talk. And finally, as I said, we'll go through the user past due experience. So someone going through the on-device method, or before this functionality was added last year to the server-side validation, you didn't really know your user was past due. All you had was a transaction that had a period end date that was sometime in the past. And there's no indication in that receipt that the person has actually canceled. Now, with this additional information on the server, you can set a property on your user object to say this person is past due, and you can show a different UI to them. You can indicate that they're past due. You can remove that functionality and tell them that they're past due. You can leave the functionality. It's kind of up to you to what you want to do. But the reason why some of this was changed was Apple learned from their mistakes, because they have just started to introduce subscriptions in the past few years. And the way they used to do subscriptions was if your account went past due after 24 hours, they canceled the subscription. But then they released, Apple Music and these types of things, and they realized, man, we're losing a lot of money to these involuntary churn customers because they canceled after 24 hours. So they changed it to 60 days, and those churn numbers dramatically dropped. Recently, we did a similar thing at Flixel with our direct sales customers. It was being canceled after 7 days, moved it to 60 days, and saw over a 50%, it was almost a 65% drop in those involuntary churn numbers just by changing that. I already mentioned you can limit access. And what you want to do is clearly inform the customers that, hey, you're still subscribed, you're just in this past due state, so can you go and update your information? One of the nice things about doing this on the App Store for you guys is that Apple handles this as well. So, because this is tied to their iTunes account, should they update their billing information at any time in any other, like when they're using some other app, or because they want to access some other app, or if they want to download even a free app, they need to make sure that the billing information is up to date. As soon as that billing information gets up to date, boom, the transaction happens, you get your money, everything's great. But what you want to do in your experience is show a button that opens this URL and it brings them directly to that account billing information page, and they can then do what they need to do in order to do that. So these are ways to improve your, one, user experience, but as well improve your sales on using auto-renewing subscriptions. Now the fun part. Okay, this is the home stretch, guys. Sorry if I've been boring you. I wanted to get through all the technical stuff, and then we can. And I've probably put everybody to sleep now. This is fun. Okay. Oops, sorry if I keep lasering you guys. I keep pressing the wrong button. So I think there's four or five things here that I want to talk about. If you've been ignoring everything and you're going to do subscriptions, pay attention to this part. It'll save you years on your life. Canceled is not what you think it means. How do you convert a paid app to a free app with in-app purchase? A new app that has auto-renewing in-app subscriptions and dealing with the propagation around that and things to know. And finally, have I mentioned a conspicuous disclaimer? Yeah, we'll talk about that again. Canceled. What do you think canceled means? Anybody? No longer subscribed? Can we add on to that a little bit more? Right, so you would assume that canceled means I was subscribed to something and I canceled, so don't do that anymore. Oh, that's weird. Oh yeah, so this is another reason why you need to poll nightly or daily or every time. In a transaction, when you update your receipt, you may now see, in a transaction that you've already seen before, you may see these two new fields. You just canceled. Well, what does this canceled transaction mean? Well, guess what? It means Apple refunded the customer, and you should consider this as though they have never purchased this before. Makes no sense whatsoever. Really, Apple? Really? But that's what you have to do. You have to look for those fields that have been added to that transaction and then consider it as though it never happened and remove access to them immediately and not at the end of the period as you thought they would. How do you know that they've churned? So on device, you go through the latest transactions, you look for this field if it's there, or if the end of the period date is in the past. If you use server side, you can use this, the presence of expiration intent means the subscription is done, and you can use that to shut off access. Okay, so that's something that you can use in order to save a lot of problems managing this. Converting a paid app to a free with in-app purchase. Apple has a great talk from last year. This is just a screenshot of it. I'll share the keynote. There's a link that goes directly to this part of the talk. They do a really good job. This is part of the talk that talks about parsing the ASN1 encoding and being able to pull all these properties out on device and doing all of these things. So attribute number 19 is the original application version. Original application version. This is great. And they tell you exactly what to do. You switch to one of these things, look for this, use that version, and then anybody that had paid for it before it went free, just unlock it for them. Makes total sense, right? You know, because you were around for both of these. So in the sandbox is nowhere near what you get in the production. Period, full stop. Here's one example. Sandbox, your original application version of any app is 1.0. What normally appears there is the version that you downloaded, the first time you downloaded it. And you'll also have an application version number in the receipt that'll show the latest version that that person has. You can actually see like what they're using today. But the original application version in the sandbox is always, always, always 1.0. So you say, okay, well, we're gonna make version 4.0 free. So anything before version 4.0 is gonna be unlocked. Makes total sense, right? Except in the production app store, the application version number is not that marketing number, it is the build version number. So what happens when we released our new app for free with in-app purchase? All of those customers who had previously paid money for this app are locked out. That was a frantic few hours to rush and get that out the door. Okay, so we learned our lesson. A few months later, releasing the Mac app. We know what application version number means now, so we're gonna do the same. We know what the build version of the Mac app is. You see where this is going, right? We know what the build version of the Mac app is, except on the Mac App Store, the value that comes back is not your build version number, it's the short build version number, the string that you give it, the marketing number. So yet again, you can't test this in the sandbox. You know, we're doing it live. You put it out there, hey, it's locked, shit. And frantically figure out why and fix it. Okay, one last one. Or I guess there's two. You have a new app, brand new app. You have in-app subscriptions because everybody says go in-app subscriptions, you're gonna release it in-app subscriptions. Maybe you showed it to a few people and they really, really liked it. In fact, they wanted to promote it on day one. In fact, they wanted an exclusive to promote it on day one. If anybody should know about this, they should. So it turns out that auto-renewing subscriptions, when you submit your app, sorry, let me back this up. When you submit your app for the first time, all the in-app purchases, that you have, you need to submit for review as well. And you do that when you do the version 1.0 submission. And they go through and they approve those things. Well, they'll approve all of the non-subscription ones, and they'll actually be approved immediately. But the auto-renewing subscriptions are pending until you click release on that app to make it live on the App Store. So for example, your app is approved on a Tuesday. That in-app purchase that was a non-consumable can go out and be propagated to all of the Apple servers in production, and everything's great. You see where this is going? Most of the time, this propagation happens quickly. Most of the time. But when you hit release for your app, you get the emails, your app has been released, and all of these auto-renewing subscriptions have now been approved for the App Store. Great, everything's approved, everything's released, everything's going out there. Except they don't always propagate immediately. So when we released Blendio a month and a half ago, or almost 2 months ago now, you open up the app, and thankfully we had a license in there, so there was something in the purchase page. But it turns out for almost 48 hours, you couldn't buy any of the subscriptions because of this tech note. There's also a link on this that goes directly to the tech note if you're interested in reading more. But what's most important is, if you can read the bottom there, activation of the in-app purchase identifiers may lag up to 48 hours before following the activation of the application. We've released how many apps, how many in-app subscriptions, never experienced this before, thought everything would be grand. Nope. So, oh wait. This alone took years off my life. So if you're going to release a new app with in-app purchases, I highly recommend that you make it available in some small country somewhere for 48 hours and then release it to the rest of the world so the propagation can happen and you don't run into this problem. Because on day one, we had one sale. And you know where that sale came from? Promoted in-app purchase, because the problem that was happening was when you make that product request, it gives you give the product IDs, the store gives you back the valid products. Instead, it was saying, oh no, all of these auto-renewing subscriptions are invalid products. So you don't show, they come back invalid, you don't have products, you don't have SK products for them, you don't show them in your store, right? But because you could tap on that button in the App Store, it gives you the SK product, and we could immediately show it to the customer and they were able to purchase it. That was painful. So please do that if you release an app with auto-renewing subscriptions. Did I mention conspicuous disclaimer? So things about the conspicuous disclaimer. Do this exactly like it is, and you're still going to get rejected. No, really, multiple times. But here's what you do. Sometimes you can, the reviewer will say, you have not shown some part or all of what needs to go into this text. For example, the last one. You've not shown that it has to be 24 hours, this 24 hours part of the line. They're like, it's not there. Yeah, it is. So simply take a screenshot in markup, highlight it, and respond to the app review rejection with that. And sometimes, some hours later, your app is magically approved. Other times, you might get some opaque response. This is where you have a few different options. One, you can then appeal to the app review board, and maybe in a few days, your app is approved. Or the app is then, the binary is rejected, and you have to submit a new one. Or it just sits there maybe for a week. At that point, what you do is you bump your version number and you submit it again, because you're going to get a different reviewer and they're not going to reject you, and everything is wonderful. Boom. Why? Really, Apple? Really? So there's 4 things that if you implement auto-renewing subscriptions in particular, are some pain points that I would like you to avoid based on my experience with that. So in summary, thank you for all staying awake, or at least most of you. We talked about why you should choose a subscription model and why is that beneficial. I know a few things about this, as you can see. I have the scars, mental and physical, to prove it. Give a brief, condensed, there's so much more that I didn't really get into, but we only had, oh my God, I'm probably already over an hour, time to do that. And finally, how do you avoid some of the major pain points for that? I think that's, oh yeah, and there's one more thing. After DubDub, should you need someone to implement this for you, I'll be doing some consulting work, so I'm available. The end. Questions? Thank you.
To your product, how do you arrive at a price point for your subscription model?
How do you arrive at a price point? Experimentation. So start somewhere. So typically, you start at a certain point. You have a revenue curve, right? It's just regular economics. You're at some price point, you're going to make some revenue. As you increase your prices, you're going to make more revenue. As you increase your prices, you're going to hit that peak, you're going to hit that maxima, and you're going to make less revenue. So you can play around with that. Having the tools to be able to do that with the new subscription offers, the intro offers, and those gives you a lot more power to be able to do that without having to pollute your in-app purchase SKUs and having all of these. Like I said, just go to look. Today, Office 365 is featured on the App Store. And if you go in there, you can see there's a list of, I think, 12 different price points, all for Office 365. And it's because they were just trying different price points, maybe different regions, maybe for different customers, or maybe the customers' use cases through the app. They're trying to present different price points in order to get people to do that. So how do you find that? You try those different price points and see where that settles out to your maximum, where you'll realize some maximum revenue. There's Gene.
First of all, thank you very much for sharing what is clearly hard-won experience on this subject. My question is, there's been a lot of talk on the App Store about how customers are going to be accepting of their apps going subscription and more of their apps going subscription. Do you have any sense of like how boiling that frog is going? Like whether people are becoming subscription resistant or what's happening there?
So there's definitely a cohort of potential customers that will not buy subscriptions. And for about a year, we removed the license option from our apps. And sorry, just briefly, the way that we had it was a license. It was free with a license, in-app purchase license. Then it was free, and you could either subscribe or buy the license, and they were presented side by side in the UI. So the subscription revenue went from 0 to about 50-50. And then because for business reasons, having people pay over and over again is better than having them pay once, we changed the UI such that it was the subscription that was shown, all the subscription plans that were shown, and then down at the bottom was buy a license, kind of like have an out for those people that just won't do that. And then the revenue continued to go up, and the distribution went to 90-10. We removed the license option. We basically lost that 10% of revenue. We threw that away. So we added it back in. And it's kind of in a similar type of total revenue is still there. So there is a cohort of that. Unfortunately, you also get a lot of negative one-star reviews on the store because all they need to do is download it. They see price points, or oh, this sucks, and they complain about that. So there is definitely some resistance there. I think we're in a transition period. Everything's a rental economy. You know, whether you're using Uber, everything we're doing is a rental economy now, and we're not buying things anymore. We're just buying access to things. So I think we'll see the adoption of it, and as you're seeing more and more, and the growth rate of the subscription businesses grow, I think people will be more comfortable with that as things go on, and it's just trying to find the right price points and things like that. Hopefully that answers your question.
Nice. All right. So when you submit your app and almost assuredly get rejected, is it not faster to just like, I don't know, drop that binary and like bump your version number and just
you could try that, yeah.
again?
Oh, you can totally try that too.
Like right off the bat? Like would that be, or did you have good experience in like highlighting parts of your disclaimer and saying like, this is actually there?
So we get rejected often for this subscription stuff. And every time they change the rules a little bit, but we've been there from day one, before day one of subscriptions, followed all the rules. We're not one of those ones that abuse these things, and still get it. We even got one where the rejection was, it's like, oh, you can't unlock apps. You can't do an app unlock. It's like, you realize these rules changed in 2016, right? Like that, didn't say that, but the rules had changed, but for some reason the reviewer either had been around a long time, maybe the documentation hasn't been updated, who knows, but they rejected. You politely respond, and they might do it. Yeah, another option is just to say, as soon as you get rejected, bump the version and roll the dice. But then you're playing that game. So there's no clear, I wouldn't say there's a clear solution to it. It's just how much you're willing to wait for it and those types of things. So yeah, it's a major pain point. And it's getting worse, not better, because there are a handful of bad apples that have been abusing in-app subscriptions and the auto-renewing subscriptions. So Apple's clamping down and forcing us to do all of these things. Unfortunately, that it cuts both sides of the good developers and the bad developers when they're trying to just get an app out, especially when you have a critical update where it's like, oh, you have a big bug fix, and it's like they're rejecting you for something that you're doing. It's there. It's right there. And, yeah, it's frustrating. Yeah. So, broke the queue.
I was curious if you've noticed any correlation between what the marketing version is and whether you get rejected. In some cases, it seemed for us that when we did a major version bump, that seemed to be more highly correlated with them rejecting us for subscription information than just a regular patch bump. And then I was also just curious, when you say a version bump, do you mean a build version bump or actually the marketing version as well?
Oh, no, it's just, so same marketing. So I guess I'll go backwards. Same marketing version, just bump the build version so you can do another submission for that release. And then it just, because what happens when you get rejected, the app goes into this state of this could get still approved or not. And it's not binary rejected. It's just in usually a metadata rejected state. So they could approve it if you go through all of this. But if you submit a new binary, that automatically rejects that binary. And then now the new one becomes the one that you can submit, or the one that goes into the process. So it basically restarts the review process by uploading a new binary. And that's just the build version. You don't have to bump, like, so then you can still go from version 1.1, still version 1.1, and you just add to that as opposed to skipping, if that answers that. Correlation to whether they do it, I don't know. I could go back to my notes and see, but I wouldn't say it. We've had bug fix and performance improvement updates that get rejected 5 times, and major version updates that just go right through, or kind of minor version updates that go right through. So yeah, I wouldn't say, I would assume that if there is major version updates, they might look at it, they might scrutinize it more, because it shows that like there's a reason for you bumping that number. So the reviewers might spend more time with it. But then how or why they do that, I don't know. I really think there's a quota. I really think there's a quota of, like, just because of some of the rejections where it was so obvious, where it's like, this text isn't there. It's like, yeah, it is. Like that, what justifies that? Either they're too lazy to look at it and they just said no, or there's some incentive to reject some apps. I don't know, but there's something needs to be fixed there. You hear me, Phil? It's definitely worth doing the promotional in-app purchases for some of the reasons that I said there. I don't have the numbers of the breakdown offhand, sorry, just to be able to say what percentage of sales was driven from that. But even if they don't do the sale immediately, just having that in-app purchase, like promoted in-app purchase, for example, there, and having them tap it to be able to download the app and get in there, that's a nice experience too, just to be able to get to that point, whether they actually follow through with the purchase or not. And with doing so we haven't implemented the new subscription offers for existing customers, but that's something that would be nice to be able to do, because you're able to see those customers that have churned or will churn and be able to offer them and give them a way to upgrade, downgrade, or a cheaper option for them. Especially with our app, it's customers, the big problem that they have is not that the app sucks, that they don't like it, that they don't, it's just more that they don't use it enough to justify the cost. And so we've got a lot of hobbyists that, if we can say to them, oh, well, here's the price point that is suitable for you, that doesn't cannibalize our core market, which is the professionals who are able and willing to pay the higher price points. Because then you have that problem of, you can decrease that price point, but if you have your price point, you need to double your sales. And then you're going to have twice as many customers. So now you have to have the support, you increase your support cost to handle those customers. So you're actually making less profit by doing that. So you have to weigh that in. So to make a short story long, the promotional offers that are available should be used. And those were motivated from feedback and problems that people have had with in-app purchases and some of the ways that they've tried to work around it. Apple has added these APIs and this functionality in order to make those things feasible and possible on the App Store, which is available on all the other regular stores or websites and things like that. Everybody's doing these types of things. So Apple's just playing catch up at this point. Yeah, Charlie? No, it isn't that much. It generally isn't much, but then when it is, it's painful. It's usually, I'd rather spend my time doing other things that's more beneficial to the product or the business than arguing with Apple about why the text is the right text and those types of things. or trying to figure out some of these workarounds. Like that was some of the pain points of trying to figure out all those workarounds, or why is this like this? Is it a large amount of time? No. So if you're looking for, is this worth the trouble? Yes, definitely. Like going back to that revenue curve, like just being able to see that revenue just continuously grow, and you can do nothing. You can have no new customers today, but you're still getting revenue because there are people from last month or the last year that are going to pay you today, even if you've done nothing to acquire new customers. So that's a nice thing to have. Whereas otherwise, what that would be zero, because if they're only paying once. If that helps.